Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat sermon with Rabbi Rebeca Schatz.
Sitting in a friend's sukkah a few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with a member of this community about the language she speaks and teaches to her children. Having grown up in France and marrying someone who grew up in the States, their children have access to 2 fluent languages at home. And the kids go to Pressman Academy, so they're adding a 3rd, Hebrew, as they get older. She and I were discussing the wonder of kids and language because, as I understand from my studies in music, if you begin to teach a 2nd or 3rd language as soon as their primary language is introduced, the child will pick it up much more quickly than if they try to learn another language as an adult. Babies and children's brains are remarkable at absorbing information like new language, which includes music as well. As a child, myself, our parents were adamant about us learning Hebrew and had an Israeli babysitter who would speak to us in Hebrew, though, of course, we answered in English. To this day, I can fluently understand Hebrew when I hear it, and yet my ability to respond back as quickly and fluently as I understand is not at the same speed or confidence level. All areas of language studies and early childhood education suggest that children learning multiple languages is only a benefit. Children who are bilingual have brains that learn to switch and become more active. They are more flexible at solving problems. They often feel stronger ties with their family, their culture, and community. And eventually, as adults, being bilingual has a higher success rate in the workforce. In this week's Parsha, Parshat Noach, the people become bilingual as a punishment. And perhaps not even bilingual. They just become unable to understand each other's languages because they have their own. Before language was jumbled, we learn from the Torah, Vayehi chol haaretz safa echat udvarim achadim. And it was the case that the whole land had one language and uniform words. Everyone spoke the same language, and as our commentators suggest, they thought the same things. It seems, based on the following events, our Torah wants us to imagine this as a sort of cult or mob, everyone saying the same things, believing the same things, and therefore, according to our rabbis, creating the same problems. Vayamru hava nivne lanu, ir umigdal v'rosho b'shamayim v'na'aseh lanu shem. And these people said, "Come, let us build a city and a tower, and its top will be in the heavens, and we will make a name for ourselves. Pen nafutz al panei chol haaretz, lest we be scattered all over the face of the land." Now, when first reading that verse, there does not seem to be anything wrong with their capital campaign and construction. However, according to our commentators, God was worried that this was an uprising and a threat to leadership and power. Vayered Adonai lirot et ha'ir, ve'et hamigdal asher banu b'nei ha'adam. And then God came down to see the city and the tower that the humans had built. Here is where we see that God was threatened by the power of language and unity in thought. God said, "If as one people with one language for all, this is how they have begun to act, then nothing that they may propose to do will be out of their reach." Hava nirda v'nivla sham saftam asher lo yishmeu ish safat re'ehu. We will go down and confuse their speech, God said, so that no one person will not understand or hear their friend or neighbor. Vayafetz Adonai otam misham al panei chol haaretz v'yachdelu livnot ha'ir. And so then God scattered them from there on the face of the land, and they stopped building the city. I know we've all heard this story of the Tower of Babel before, but whenever I read it and break it down like this, it really frightens me. It's a scary story of what those in power will do if they feel threatened and do not stop to ask questions. I'm not trying to claim that the people were doing something so wonderful and heroic that this was a crime against humanity. However, what if the story had been different, and instead of accusing and destroying, God had asked a question, formed a relationship, and wondered what this building was a result for them? Based on what we just read, I'm not sure the people even had a chance. And yet the punishment was to create a lack of understanding and diaspora and confusion. That's really very hard for me. Of course, when everyone speaks the same language, we assume understanding and an ease in relationship. However, learning another language or being surrounded by others who speak a language that you do not understand can also foster curiosity. I always wonder what's being said when I'm in an environment where I cannot understand the speech around me. And not in a hostile, jealous way, in a way that makes me want to learn the language, or at least what had just been said, and engage in the relationship even more intentionally to communicate in this way that person seems to be most comfortable communicating in. In a world where even if we do speak the same language, we have trouble understanding and listening to one another, this story is painful and scary. Two people who both speak, let's say, English, might be discussing something with different levels of passion and goals or outcome. And all of a sudden, it is as if we are back in this story, shockingly unable to understand the other as punishment. Why? Because we don't ask enough questions before we accuse, and we don't listen to those who we have already decided are wrong. The Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi, a 12th century French commentator, makes mention of the word Shema, which was used in God's direction to what will happen to the people's language. It'll be all confused and jumbled up, and the people will not hear their friends. Radak says, Asher lo yishme'u means they will not understand. The root Shema, he teaches, is used here as hearing with one's heart, as distinct from hearing with one's ears. People will not be able to interact with compassion because they will be deaf to the cries, the words, the teachings of their neighbor. Now that is true punishment. But I still wonder why. Why is this what God thought was necessary? To give people different languages and to make them less likely to interact because they cannot understand what the other is saying? How is this a logical consequence to building a tall tower? If while speaking the same language, we were not able to see outside of ourselves, to recognize God or the rest of creation, how are we supposed to do that now that we're scattered around the world and speaking languages that we don't all understand? Maybe this is the challenge, to seek out curiosity, to find common ground and listen through our differences, learning how we are different, what our different beliefs might be, and celebrating each other for the ways we are not similar, and therefore boost each other's curiosity and excitement. As is written in the Women's Torah commentary, God prefers diversity to unity and uniformity, and this story actively promotes that. It is not a punishment. It's a challenge in a moment where being too similar was a hindrance to our growth as a people. We should seek out the diversity, dwell in the curiosity, and offer intentional time for conversation and question asking to deepen our learning. One final story on the power of language. Daniela Gilboa, a former Israeli hostage released on January 25th, was seen in a video following her release singing Shalom Aleichem in Arabic. In a conversation, Daniela talked about one of the ways she and the girls with her in captivity managed to celebrate their faith in an environment that was hostile to their religious observance. Gilboa is a gifted singer and comes from an observant Jewish family. She and the other girls she was held with taught themselves how to sing Shalom Aleichem in Arabic. They sang the song in the traditional melody written by Israel Goldfarb, a Polish cantor who immigrated to New York in the late 19th century. Shalom Aleichem Malachei Hasharet. But the lyrics were translated into Arabic so as to not draw the attention to their captors. It's moving to think of Daniela finding anchoring and even joy ahead of the holiest Jewish day of the week through all those months in captivity. I have to imagine, because most Israelis have, that Daniela knew some amount of Arabic before being taken hostage. Learning the languages of the country, Hebrew, English, and Arabic, is done with pride in many of the schools in Israel. The belief that by understanding one another, we can have more conversations and ask more questions. However, I can promise you that Daniela never learned bits of Arabic, imagining that she would be singing Shalom Aleichem in front of her captors as a way of connecting to her religion and holding on to her faith through the language that was spoken in the room by those who were hurting her. The teaching of different languages in Israel, for some, is a way of recognizing that which was taken away from us with the Tower of Babel: ease of communication, understanding, and putting the challenge of asking questions and needing to venture into complicated relationship without shared language. And here, her ability to connect to another language she knew saved her soul and made her seem more relatable to her captors. Every morning we say, Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam, blessed be the one who spoke the world into being. Words are taken seriously in our tradition and in our religion and in our world. Words create and words destroy. And Baruch she'amar is recited in Hebrew, not the lingua franca of this community, nor of many others. And yet it's a language we speak together when we pray, and a language we hear and read and sometimes use when we visit our homeland. We are blessedly bilingual, and we need to build worlds with our words and not destroy them. So teach your children a second language. Seek out ways to understand those who speak a different language than you to better connect with them. Dwell in the realm of curiosity when surrounded by unknown words, cultures, sounds, and images. Find the blessing in this bilingual challenge from God and start asking questions to truly listen. To know and to find those scattered who we once built buildings with and are supposed to know and share life with.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.